completely. Have you ever asked yourself what life was like inside for Republican women who spent years behind bars here for paramilitary activities? Well, a new book published by Shanway Press is telling their stories. Pauline Jackson, who herself is a former IRA prisoner and served time in Armagh Jail, is one of those who compiled the book, and we can speak to her about it now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good to talk to you. Is it an objective book, Pauline?
The book is actually a collection of the oral histories of women's prison experiences. So there was no questions set down when we were recording people for the book. It basically is the women's own stories. They have told what it was like from their point of view. There are a few chapters which set the book into some kind of chronological order for people who may not be aware of that period of history. The stories range from 1969 to 2003.
So it's a celebration, perhaps, of women Republican prisoners. Is that the case?
Well, it's their stories, it's their history. I think this book is very different from books that have gone before in that I don't think there has ever been such a comprehensive collection of Republican women's stories. So it's a book which contains 130 stories, poems, letters of Republican women ex-POWs, and there are 28 stories given by the families of Republican women who were deceased before the book came into print.
Right. There are quite a few very well-known women involved, aren't there? Like the Price sisters, for instance, who were in prison. Eileen Hickey, who was in Armagh Jail and who was instrumental in starting to put this together, and others like Martina Anderson, Jennifer McCann, for instance. Yes,
the stories are all fascinating. I mean, I have to say, as a compiler, and I can speak for the other 5 compilers, that this book for us was fascinating. We just loved doing it. We loved the way the women gave their stories so freely. It was, of course, the brainchild of Eileen Hickey. Eileen Hickey was the OC of the Republican women in Armagh prison from 1973 until her release in 1977. And she began the project of collecting the stories. And sadly, she died in 2006 before the book came into being. Yeah. And a few of her comrades, Evelyn Brady, Kate McKinney, and Eva Patterson, carried on with the project. And then in 2009, I became involved, Rosie Hamill, another ex-POW, and my sister Martine Jackson, and we are the 6 compilers of the book.
And it's interesting just listening to you. You're talking about your comrades and about OCs and so on. That's the kind of language that a lot of people listening to this will think was a thing of the past, if you like. It's given the fact that while many of those who were prisoners, such as Martina Anderson or even Carol McKillen, I mean, they don't in any way hide it, of course, but that's not where they are anymore. They've moved on. Is this pulling people back in that direction, do you think?
This project was an attempt to readdress that gap in history. I think women and revolutionary women have always been written out of history. I mean, the word history itself says it all. His story. This book was an attempt to address that gap, to record the oral histories of women while they were still alive. I mean, like, some people have died since writing their stories. Even, Mary Kennedy, one of the first women who was interned, she died after we recorded her story and before the book actually came into print. It's a fascinating oral history of women, their own story. All we did was
write it down, more or less,
and write a few chapters which gave a sort of the historical background.
I'm just interested, I mean, you'll be aware, Pauline, that there'll be a lot of people listening to this who won't like it. They'll feel that this is completely unacceptable, that it is perhaps in some way glorifying what these women might have done, or indeed what they were convicted of having done. I mean, is there any Is there any way in the book that you deal with that, or that they deal with it? I mean, do they talk at all about what they had done, or perhaps about the fact that their actions had ended up with them being in prison for really long periods of time?
Well,
is there any regret in it?
I'm not here to talk about people's politics or their beliefs. I mean, that is part. I do not speak for all.
Well, I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just asking: is there any sense of regret for maybe the hurt which their actions caused?
Well, the thing that the book is not about. The book is not about what happened in the past. It's not about the war itself. The book is solely about what happened to these women from they were arrested, processed in the different barracks in Castlereagh, taken to Armagh, and their prison experiences. That is what the book is about. All the stories start from where they were arrested and end with them being released. So the women do not talk or try to justify their politics in the stories. The stories are basically their recollection of being arrested, being interrogated, going to prison, and their experiences in prison. So that is what the book is about.
Yeah. I suppose I'm wondering, were there any discussions even between themselves of regrets, or did they all feel it was absolutely worth it, and there weren't wasted years? When you look at some of them, very nice-looking young women. I mean, I know Martina Anderson was known as the beauty queen bomber, but she was a bomber.
We didn't discuss things like that. What we did discuss, the thing that came across from this book, see from my point of view as a compiler, when we interviewed people, when we taped their stories, all the stories were different. Well, some of them are the same theme running through them. But what came across from all the stories was this sense of comradeship, that what got them through the prison struggles was the sense of belonging, the sense of comradeship, the sense of looking after one another. That has stayed with them all their lives. And maybe they don't see each other that often, these women, but there is always that sense of belonging and comradeship. And that is basically what the book is about. And as I say, some stories talk about the trauma of prison experience. For instance, when I was taping some of the stories, it was traumatic to listen to women talking about being strip searched and how traumatising that was for them. It was traumatising for me and the other girls to listen to women talking about being in prison and suffering bereavement. Some women who may not get out to see their families.
But there was no conversation.
All these women.
Sorry, there was no conversation at all about what it was that they had done that put them in there in the first place.
No, that's not what the book is about. The book is about recording their recollection of their prison experiences and maybe their experience in Castlereagh and other holding centres before they went to prison. That's basically what the book is about.
Well, just to tell you, they've got 3 texts which have just come in front of me here. One says there were no prisoners, no POWs, just jailed terrorists. Another says the book is glorifying murderers. End of.
I think people have to buy the book and read it to see. Unless you buy this book and read it yourself, I don't know how people can be making comments about the book. There are 130 stories of women who are in prison, which we recorded while they were alive, and there are 28 stories given by the families of women who were deceased and who had been in prison. So I think people need to read the book, and of course everybody is going to come at the history of this war from their own perspective.
Isn't that true, Pauline?
Different, but this book is about women's prison memoirs, and I think you have to read it before you start sending texts or making any comments.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Pauline Jackson there. You can keep your views coming on.